All right, we're back. So we were struggling with that piece when we left, and what we found out was if we use anything else other than absolute layout inside of Scrollpane, we're good. Don't use absolute layout in the Scrollpane. That's the answer. So let's get rid of these text fields because these text fields are not going to be the ones we want to use, right? We're going to make them dynamic, right? So let's get rid of all these. But before we do, let's go back to our source code and take a look how these text fields are added. So basically, you define a new text field, you set the columns to 10, right, which is important for us to know, set columns to 10 to align with our grid, right? And then what we want to try and do is, and look at all these, this is kind of our template to add one text field into our grid, right? So we have our, in this particular case, our JScrollPane is the one we added in with set auto scroll to true and our grid layout, grid bag layout, just a second. And here's we call this grid bag layout to the layout that we're going to use with columns and rows and all this kind of stuff. And notice that it uses arrays to define our columns and our rows and blah, blah, blah. That's just our grid bag layout, right? And I'm just going to stop it to here. This is our, we're going to fix this. We have to reassign this one, or, and this is, we did this from dragging and dropping, right? So we can fix this grid bag layout with the column widths, the column heights, row heights, and column weights and row weights, which is a different thing. We're going to leave all this as is, all right? And we're going to change the name because grid bag layout underscore to do panel, right, is really ugly for our grid bag layout, right? So that's one thing we need to do. Our text fields, this is the way we're going to add all of our text fields. This is the style of our text fields. And notice that it says my grid Y component, right, is going to increment. So instead of me incrementing and being absolute, I can increment my grid Y component and the rest would stay the same, right? So that's what's going to be at. Every time I add my text field, it's going to add all this stuff in my loop, right? So I don't need any of this stuff. Let's get rid of it all. We're going to make sure we don't take anything we don't need because that's pretty cool. So this is my content pane, add to do scroll pane. And that we need up to there. Sorry, we need to have this piece. To do scroll pane has to be added in there. But not this. All right, so let's fix this up now. So we know that my scroll pane, my to do scroll pane, it's got to be something that's going to be added in on the scope, right? My J panel, this J panel that we're using called to do panel, that's also going to become on the class scope. So let's grab this one and go to the top. Then I'll upload everything to GitHub for you guys, which we're going to add up here, right? Notice all these ones here got added automatically, right? We don't need all of these, right? So we'll get rid of those. But we'll add some stuff in here. So we'll say private, and we'll add in a J panel, which we're going to call to do panel, right? That's what we're going to add in there. We're going to scroll down to where that area is again. We're going to fix this up in a second. So that's the first thing. So that's my private to do panel. We're not going to assign it here. We're going to say here this dot underscore to do panel is equal to new J panel. And this is going to be, we're going to put a note that says container for our to-dos. You would do the same thing for your courses, our to-dos, right? So we're adding the J panel in there, and then we're going to make a scroll pane. So add scroll pane, to contain our to-do panel. That's what it's going to do. That's what that scroll pane is for, right? And now again, we named it correctly, but we want to put this on the class scope. So we're going to go all the way back to the top, and we're going to put this back in here, like so. And we're going to make this private, and put a semicolon, and go all the way back down to this area here. And notice how now I have my scroll pane, and we're going to get rid of this declaration and use this keyword, right, to grab this piece right here, right? And then of course this should also be this dot to do panel. So I'm fixing up this stuff here so we have the same naming convention that we're using everywhere else, and we're referring to scope variables that are part of our class as opposed to here locally. And now this is a grid bag layout. I want to also use this grid bag layout as something that that makes sense. Now, here's a question. Do I have to make this, do I ever have to change my grid bag layout or ever have access to it? And chances are the answer is no, right? So this does not have to be on the global scope or the class scope. So we'll just call this grid bag, undo. We'll rename this. So we'll refactor, rename lowercase grid bag layout that we're going to use. This is our custom grid bag layout that we're going to use, right? And here's where we're going to define this. So in here we're going to define a grid bag layout for our use. That's what we're going to use. And the grid bag layout gives us some column widths and heights and all this kind of stuff, and we define already, right? And then what we're going to do is here, this to-do panel, this _to-do panel, set the panel to the grid bag layout. So we're going to do that. We'll say set the to-do panel to the grid bag layout, defined above. And what is the grid bag layout? It's a bunch of grids, and we've defined how many widths and heights they have. In this particular example, notice how this is an array of row heights with row height properties like 30, 30, 30. We're going to have to modify this array, as an example, as we want to add in some row heights. And my recommendation, guys, is for our example, instead of making it unlimited numbers, let's stick to a total number of courses of about 10. All right. I know it says on any number of courses that the user wants. Let's make them 10, guys. All right, because otherwise it's going to be crazy. So 30, 30, 30. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, 10 of those. Row weights, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We'll think about ways of making this a little better later on. Column weights are the same. We'll save that. And then one of the things is, I got to put my double in there, right? So, okay, and then we've set the grid bag layout. Now, this is an example of our text field that we're going to add in. We're going to do this dynamically. We're going to add it, this text field, with these constraints and everything else. We're going to add this to the to-do panel. This to to-do panel.add. This text field is an example, right? Now, I'm wondering if we ever have to get to that grid bag layout again. If we're going to wipe away our panel and put it back, which is what I want to do, right? I want to wipe it every time we change that setting. We're going to wipe away our panel or clean everything out of our panel and put it back. Clean everything out of our panel and put it back. No, we don't have to do that. Okay, good. So, so what I want to do is, this is the kind of format that I want to add in, right? And with this, where it says our text field 1 and our grid bag layout for the text field 1 property, right? Which is this field, this text field right here, right? Notice that it says grid bag constants for grid bag text field 1, right? Which is a type new grid bag constraints. It's almost like we have to create our own custom class, which is our to-do text field, right? That has all these grid bag constraints built in. So let's go back to our, before we fix these errors, let's go back to our package, right? And we have our example window. We also have this scrollable panel we're going to get rid of because we don't need that anymore. So back, goodbye, scrollable panel. We don't want you.
We don't need to.
And we need to do this one. We're going to add it. You don't need to?
No. If we call the remove all on the
oh, yeah. No, I know. I'm talking about...
We don't need to change the layout.
No, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a new class, that I'm going to make, and I'm going to call this class, because I want to make it so that I don't have to put all this stuff up. Well, I'm making a new class, so my text field is going to be a special JText field class that's going to modify, that's going to have my grid bag constants built into it. So I don't have to do this over and over again. That's a waste of time for me, right? So every time we instantiate a text field of my custom text field class, it'll have my ways of doing it. So we're going to call this a to-do text field, That's what it is. And we're gonna use the text field, so J text field, as a template. So here's my J text field, and we're gonna click finish. And it says constructors from the superclass and inherited abstract method. Sure, there's nothing in there to inherit because you notice how it gives me all this extra stuff. I don't care about all this extra stuff. These are just additional information that I want to override, right? So example, my JText field, when I create this inside my empty constructor, or inside when I pass in some information to my text field, right? For example, my to-do text field number of columns and all this kind of stuff. These are all the things that I want to put in. But inside of here, somewhere, I want to set up my this stuff here, going back to my example window, right? So notice how each time I set up my JText field, I have the empty constructor, and then I set all this stuff inside of it, right? Well, that's what I want. So I don't need any of these other constructors. I just need to modify my empty constructor so that I add in that extra stuff. So going back to that, I'm going to grab the example that we have here, which is all this stuff, right here. I'm going to kind of copy this stuff, go back into this, and paste. You see what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to talk this grid bag constraints, right? We're going to call this for my, we'll call this constraints. Now, undo. We'll call this thing, and I'll save all this stuff later on. Refactor, rename. We'll call this stuff constraints. Thanks a lot. And then what we're going to say is all these constraints are the ones that we're going to use for our particular layout, right? Because this is the one for our to-do text field, right? And then what we're going to do is I'm going to add this thing to the to-do panel, right? Which is being called. So the to-do panel is actually going to be passed as a reference into my text field, and I'm going to add this thing in. So as soon as I instantiate my text field, it's going to add it to the to-do panel automatically. So I don't have to do this add thing at all, right? So how do I pass that in? Well, I pass it in here. So I'm going to say this dot underscore to-do panel, a reference to my to-do panel that I want to pass in, right? Now I don't have a constructor like that, but I'm going to make it. So it passes in my to-do panel, which is of type JPanel, right? So JPanel, right? And we're going to say, we're going to call this thing the local to-do panel, right? And then we don't know what JPanel is. We're going to add that import to this particular class, which is done. We'll add that import. And we're going to pass that in. So when we go back, we're going to take this same code right here, and we're going to just refactor it a little bit. Go here. So in my constructor, we're going to say, whatever my to-do panel is, add this text field itself, which is going to be this, because this is a text field. So add this text field with these constraints. That's what this is going to do. So as soon as I call this JText field, if I create a JText field for the first time, it's going to do all this stuff for me. It's going to add it to the panel. It's going to take care of my constraints. It's going to do everything. So I can add those into my array over and over again. It's going to have all of the things that I need ahead of time, right? Okay, so I've done all this stuff, and one more thing is my text field set columns to 10, so I need to put that in. So of course I'm going to say this dot set columns to 10, right? So I want to do all that inside my constructor, so I never have to do it again, right? And now I can wipe this stuff out. Okay, so how does that work now? Right? Well, I'm going to add in this dot pane add my scroll panel, right? And into my scroll pane, right? My to-do panel and my scroll pane. And then later down here, when I do this, instead of creating an array list that I'm adding in JText fields, I'm going to add an array list of to-do text fields, right? The ones that I made. And each of my items in my array list are going to be of type to-do text fields, which is going to be compatible with the grid bag layout. Right? It's a little bit easier than doing the scrollable. Still not easy, right? But I'm going to give you the code, which is the good thing. So you're going to have all the code. You're not going to like struggle for this kind of thing. And I've only made it so that the grid bag layout has 10 spaces for it. If I was to show you what it looks like on design view, it shouldn't break. Let's see. We're pretty good. It doesn't show anything. So if you notice, here's my to-do scroll pane. With just my to-do panel, right? That's kind of at the top left corner of the screen. How come it's over here and my to-do scroll pane is not even showing? How come? So I haven't positioned it here. So that's one thing I still left to do, because this is still part of my my stuff. If you notice, my bounds for my scroll pane can't be the top corner of my screen, and it can't be empty the way it is. It has to be down here. So I'm going to kind of take this, move it to here. It's important to kind of do for the second. And this is my scroll pane. And notice how it's changed size, but my x coordinate has to be 100. There it is. And because that's my to-do scroll pane, it's on the outside. And my y coordinate has to be, like, let's say right here, which is probably around 120, right? So let's go back to my to-do scroll pane. Y coordinates 120. We're going to have some weird effects, right? 120. Oops. Hate when I do that. Switch to code. Undo. Right? Scroll set bounds to 0. Let's see, it's really 100. 100, and this minus 131 makes no sense, right? That doesn't make any sense. So a 100 x and y coordinates is going to be 120, and the width, let's say we'll make the width 20 by or 30 by 30 for now, just to give us a width and a height, right? And then go back to design view and see what that looks like. So there it is, right? But notice how that piece is in there, and I'm going to size it by hand. So we're going to make this so it's like this, like we had it before. There it is, right? So we have that. That has to be in there like that, or else it won't appear. It would have appeared in the top left corner of my screen. So that's another piece that I had to take care of. Save. Now if I look at this, it's kind of spaced it out correctly. My set bounds is 300 by 300 approximately with a J panel and so on. And that pane itself is where everything's going to appear. And if I look down here, this is where I'm going to do all my code, and we'll probably do this later on tonight now because we've run out of time. Questions so far on what we've done? We've been struggling to put this scrollable panel in place, and I'm trying to show you what to do. I'm kind of trying to give you a template to do your assignment number 4. That's what I'm trying to do for you, right? So you're not kind of aimless on this thing, right? Otherwise, you'll struggle. You won't know how to add things. And what we're going to do is we're going to sorry, you already did it?
Most of it.
Good. What we're going to do is we're going to dynamically add stuff into my little to-do panel, right? And when I click that button again, we'll wipe it out, everything that's in that to-do panel, and add stuff in there again. So we'll resize it dynamically as we go, and we're going to use the remove all method to remove everything, to trick us into knowing that when I'm clicking this thing, I'm actually adding or removing. Okay? And that's it for me for now. Later on, we'll do that, and we'll start off with a bit of Java effects. Oh, just as an aside, if you want to get together later on, things you need before we let you go is you need to download and install some components that I got to mention. And one of them is, if I click on my Java, one of the things you need to do is this thing called EFX clips. That's what we're downloading later on. If you get EFX clips, there's a requirement, a couple of requirements. One of them is this, when we add stuff in, this one piece here that adds in the X text dependency. And then we're going to add in this EF Eclipse for later on tonight, those two pieces. So look that up. And then the other piece is we need to add in Scene Builder by hand, right? Because Scene Builder is right there. There's actually 2 Scene Builders, and you can get it on this website that I'm going to give you tonight. So once you add those 2 components in, we can actually do almost like the same kind of window builder functionality we have right now with JavaFX. Otherwise, we're all coding by hand, guys, which is a pain in the ass, right? So let's not do that tonight. I'm going to show you how to do this all piece by piece on the video, okay? And that's it for me for now.